and welcome. This is False Start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm your host, John Buhler, lead writer, Fansided.com. As you can see, I am flying solo like a cup because computers, humidity, moisture, whatever, does not cooperate there in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Cody Williams' ship is in the docking bay, but he'll be back hopefully on Thursday when we do a show about a progressive rock band centered in the 80s with the name that's only four letters and it rhymes. So, or it's the same two letters repeated. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, gonna have just an interesting show here for you guys here on a Monday, middle of June here, kind of the dog days of college football season. But I think it's still worthwhile to have interesting show, got interesting things to talk about here. So without further ado, let's get to our first and 15 here with some do Host or do Host. I came across this video for ESPN, and it was arguing, is Texas the most overvalued team in college football? They are slated to have, what, 10 and a half wins on the season, and I'm going to go do Host 1S, yes. It's a very interesting dichotomy here when it comes to Texas because this is a team, for the most part, that you and I and everybody else is very much in favor of, like, okay, yeah, they're a lock to make the playoff. They're going to make the playoff. It would be we'd be stunned if it didn't happen, but they also have a very challenging schedule. And I don't really need to get down to the nitty gritty of it here, but like you've got what three really tough road games on your schedule. You got to open the season at the Horseshoe in Columbus versus Ohio State. Then I believe you have Florida at home, and then I believe or you have Florida on the road, and you got Georgia on the road. So for you to get to 10 and a half wins to beat that over, you're going to have to win all the games, not the nine games that are not included there, which includes Red River. And you also need to, in A&M and Lone Star, you got to win two of the three between Ohio State, Florida, and Georgia. And I'm not so sure that they're going to. And I don't know, it's just I go back and forth on how I feel about Texas. Like again, like they're a playoff lock because like I feel even if they lose a game or two, they're gonna be like a top three or four team in the SEC. And if you're in that grouping, then you're gonna make the playoff just based on how the rest of the college football world is gonna unfold. But like you didn't beat Georgia either game last year. Then you got to play them in their house in Athens, a place that Georgia hasn't lost a game in over 5 years. So it's been a minute since the Dogs have lost between the hedges. You're also breaking in a new starting quarterback in Arch Manning, immensely talented, very famous last name and everything like that. Has been in the system for this will be his third year playing for the Longhorns, but he's going to replace Quinn Ewers at starting quarterback. And I think when it comes to Texas, like can you win two of those games? And I'm looking at it like you need to beat Florida. I don't think you're going to beat Georgia. It comes down to the Ohio State game. And I think in a way, like the way I'll probably say it for the most part is the team that wins this game in the Horseshoe week one, when a game day and big noon kickoff are there, like they will be rewarded for winning that game, whereas the loser's not going to be punished so much. Like it's a feather in your cap in the non-conference, so to speak. And if this game were played in Austin, then maybe I'd be a little bit more in favor of Texas winning it. But when it comes to like Ohio State and everything like that, it's going to be there. Game day is going to be there. It's going to be Lee Corso's final game, working the pregame for College Game Day. This is the place that he had his first headgear pick back in '96 when he put on a Brutus Buckeye's head. But anyway, like I'm looking at this. There's just so much unknown here, and I think this like if we're going to bank in that Texas is going to win the SEC and they're going to win 11 games, I'm not quite there. I'm leaning more towards Georgia probably winning the SEC again next year. But I mean, these two teams, like I would be stunned if they don't make the playoff. But like I don't think we can go through the whole point of it through this part of the offseason and be so sold on Texas and being like, oh my gosh, yeah, they're absolutely going to win 12, go 12 and 0. Like last year, they had a relatively soft schedule in some capacities. Like you got Georgia at home and you still lost. You got A&M. I mean, that was probably your second hardest game on the schedule, and that was kind of why like I always felt that Texas was not going to win a national championship last year, just because I didn't think they were as battle tested as they needed to be. I think this year it could happen. I think that, there's another opportunity to be had. I don't really have a team that I'm leaning strongly on winning the national championship. For the time being, I'm probably leaning Penn State, maybe Clemson, but as soon as that comes out of my mouth or pops into my head, I'm like, no, that can't be true. But I do feel pretty confident that Texas is going to be among the eight or so teams that are going to make the playoff, that have a chance to win a national championship. But right now, like, I don't know, they're probably going to go about like 10-2 and make it more so than like, going 11-1 or 12-0. That's kind of the way that I'm seeing it with the Longhorns. I know Cody would probably disagree with me on this because he loves Texas. He loves he loves him some Quinn Ewers. Maybe not as much with Arch Manning. Again, this is going to be a year for him where like for lack of a better word, he's just going to be eating a lot of S sandwiches, because North Carolina is going to be down. Duke might be good. Clemson's going to be really good. It's just going to be very challenging for him across the board. But really tie a bow on it with this regarding Texas. I just feel as though like there's a lot of money to be had going with the under here. And I forget the other team that was tied in tandem here was take LSU. Take LSU's over. I think it was 8.5, but do it after they lose to Clemson in week one at the other Death Valley. I don't think the gap between LSU and Texas is as much as people think it is. I would still take Texas over LSU, but LSU's in that cluster of teams with like Alabama, South Carolina, Florida, uh, that could make the playoff and might, but like I wouldn't be shocked if they didn't make it, whereas I would be in the case of both Georgia and Texas. So do Host 1S. Texas might be the most overvalued team in college football. Moving on to our second topic here with some that's my quarterback. Ryan Grubb said last week that if the season started today, that Ty Simpson would be the team's starting quarterback over Keelan Russell, over Austin Mack. And I think this is kind of where Alabama was leaning uh, into the spring game out of, 8A and everything like that. I think the future of the team is definitely Keelan Russell. I know with Austin Mack, he had been, recruited by Kalen DeBoer at Washington. Came over last year and played with him in Alabama. This is his third year with DeBoer, second at Alabama. He's probably the most physically gifted of the three quarterbacks, but the fact that he's not winning the job or winning out at this point, it just kind of leads me to believe that for the most part, it may not happen for him. He may need to transfer a second time. And when I'm looking at Russell, I mean, maybe he will eventually be the starter. Maybe he plays better in practice. Maybe he usurps Mack on the depth chart. Maybe he usurps Simpson on the depth chart. But like, I always kind of felt that that was a little bit too like trying to think what the word is. Like, we can't take the cake out of the oven too soon. We got to let this thing bake a little bit more. But with Simpson. Again, I think I'm a little bit higher on Alabama this year than Cody is. They have a challenging schedule again. They went 9-3 last year. They were the best team that missed the playoff, according to what the selection committee saw. Um, when it comes to Simpson, he's been with the program the longest. He's a former five-star recruit. His dad's a college head coach, most notably at UT Martin. And he was kind of I think what it was is like maybe he could have been the guy to replace Bryce Young, but the physical traits that Jalen Milroe possessed like made him kind of look not as not as promising of a prospect as he once was, for lack of a better word. But now it's looking like it's going to be him. And I think what this does is I think it raises the floor for Alabama considerably, enough to the point where like their floor is probably 8-4. And that's a worst case scenario sort of thing. If you go 8-4 under Kalen DeBoer in year two, you got to make the playoff in year three or you're going to be gone. But that being said, like if he raises the floor, then maybe the talent around him, maybe Ryan Williams takes his game to another level here in his second year out of high school, or his should be his true freshman season because he graduated early. But like as I'm um as I'm looking at this with Ty Simpson, I think that like just the knowledge of the school and his teammates and everything like that, if everybody's buying in on him, then I think we should too. That's not really like my biggest problem with this statement or whatever it is not necessarily the quarterback being in the lead. He looked pretty good at A-Day, by the way. So like I can get behind this. And I think it go into Tallahassee and I think he can deliver a week one road victory over the Seminoles. Be a nice feather in his cap, really be a nice, win in the non-conference because let's be real, Florida State's not going 2-10 again. They're probably going to win about 6 or 7 games with Thomas Castellanos at quarterback, with Gus Malzahn as the offensive coordinator. And Mike Norvell is a good head coach. I know people have kind of turned on him in recent years, but like he's pretty good at what he does. I mean, look at what he did taking Florida State out of its quagmire, making them really good. They're back, but he'll get them back out. Certainly the coach that we all think of when we think of really good Memphis Tigers football as well. My thing with Mike Norvell, or not Mike Norvell, Kalen DeBoer and Ty Simpson and everything else like that with regards to Alabama is the messenger. This is coming from Ryan Grubb. This isn't coming from Kalen DeBoer. And it's not to the degree that I've seen this with Michigan with Sharon Moore, where he's still operating like, Jim Harbaugh is going to come back. This is Jim Harbaugh's team. Um, and I'm just serving as the interim head coach for a couple of years. Like, it's not to that degree with DeBoer, but like for DeBoer being like the offensive vendor candidate that he was, offensive guru coming over from Indiana on Tom Allen's staff, first getting connected with Michael Penix Jr., then eventually having him reunite with him in Seattle. And I think Grubb being in, try to think of the word, is try to with being with the Seattle Seahawks last year in the NFL. I think that this kind of opens his eyes a little bit. It doesn't feel like he has to beat around the bush so much. I think he can speak a little more candidly, feel a little more confident. He's like, yeah, I was, I've sorry, I've been a really high-end offensive coordinator for the last several years. So respect me. But the single biggest thing is like, why is DeBoer not saying this message? Again, maybe he's not the guy being asked it, but like, why are we getting the pulse of the Alabama quarterback room from their offensive coordinator, not their head coach? And I understand that a lot of head coaches want to keep this like close to the vest. It doesn't matter what side of the ball they favor, whether they're a former quarterback themselves, whether they're a former defensive star, whether they're, a CEO type that played offensive line, wide receiver, it does not matter. But as I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about this, I just think Grubb this could be very interesting with Grubb coming back and working for DeBoer. I mean, it had been working perfectly, but there had to have been a reason also why he didn't come to Tuscaloosa the first time, why he stayed in Seattle. I mean, yes, maybe an opportunity to be an NFL offensive coordinator is just too good of a deal to pass up, but like I guess like the non-committal nature of it all kind of makes me wonder if that working relationship is as good as we think it is. I mean, there's other guys like that are still the Alabama staff, like Nick Sheridan and Jamarcus Shepard. I don't think they're gone. They're still there. I mean, so they got like demoted because Grubb came back. I'm still trying to understand how that works. Meanwhile, you still have two defensive coordinators there with Kane Womack and Maurice Linguist. Like, how many cooks do you need in this kitchen? Like, it feels like they're just micromanaging the piss out of each other in some ways. And maybe this is a way to deflect blame where things don't go right for Caleb DeBoer in year two. I mean, he's not from the South. He's from South Dakota. He's from the Southern Dakotas, but that's northern of the southeastern United States. Not that that matters. As long as he wins football games, I think everybody in the Yellowhammer State's not going to care. Where a guy could be from the moon, it doesn't matter. But what I think is very important is like you do not want people on your staff and on your players like putting in doubt that you might not be the guy. And I think we're starting to kind of get there with DeBoer a little bit. Like I'm not saying promote Grubb from within, but like this is a guy that thinks a future college head coach for sure. I don't know what the job would be, maybe if Luke Fickell fails and he's got that massive buyout, but like who cares? Like money grows on trees, apparently in this world. But for the most part, like I just kind of find the fact that it's coming from Grubb and not necessarily DeBoer on Simpson, that has my intrigue. So Alabama, maybe the record's not as high variance of it is, but I think the vibes certainly could be there. So that's kind of what I got to say about that. Let's move on to our third topic with some 4 for 4 here. Um, so I was hoping if Cody was going to be on the program today, we'd talk about this and get a little bit more understanding of other teams. And I'm just going to do this right now. Our 4 for 4, what I'm going to do today is I'm gonna rattle off one team in each Power Four league that I just don't have a good feel for. Like I don't know what they are at this stage of the offseason. Maybe I'll get a better grasp of what the team could be, but we'll have a better feeling for them once the season starts. But like right now, it's just been very hard to peg. I'm going to start with the ACC, and I'm going to go with the Pittsburgh Panthers here. I think I had them slotted in like seventh out of 17 teams in my power rankings for the summer. I have them behind Duke, but I have them in kind of a similar cluster as Duke. Where like maybe they could get to Charlotte. I don't think they're going to win. I really like Eli Holstein at quarterback, former Alabama transfer. Looked really good for the Panthers in the first 2/3 of the season, and then it kind of slowed down a little bit because that's what Pitt does. The Pat Narduzzi of it all just kind of frustrates me. He defense is usually going to be pretty good, but he's kind of a very headstrong personality, and I feel like he's not always like the best coach to work for if you're an offensive mind. But I would say that like Holstein seems to open things up for them. But then again, every time there's been a Pitt quarterback of note that I've been high on in my life after seeing some success, like the next year they don't live up to it. And this includes Kenny Pickett in his first year with the Steelers. And maybe I wasn't that high on him in all retrospect, but like I'm just kind of wondering like what is Pitt? Like is Pitt going to win 9 games? Is Pitt going to win 5 games? They're just a very hard team for me to peg and figure out where they are in the ACC pecking order. And again, I think a lot of these teams that I'm going to have on here, like I've got them in the middle because I just don't know. And if I had to throw another team in there from the ACC that I just don't have a really good feel on, my other candidate would have been for this exercise, probably would have been it was very strongly Pitt for me, but I think the other one I would have had is NC State. It's the same sort of thing where like, okay, maybe you've got better quarterback play. Dave Doran's been there for a while. We've seen the team. These just teams are just very hard to peg because they're so consistently inconsistent. Like whenever you want to sell on them, they overachieve. Whenever you buy them, they disappoint. So that's kind of why I've got them in the middle of the ACC. Definitely Pitt, maybe a little bit of North Carolina State. Moving on down to the Big Ten, the team that I have the hardest time getting a good feel on right now has got to be Minnesota. I think PJ Fleck knows exactly what he has in this team. He's got a really good feel and pulse for what this team's about. They seem to be, recruiting their kind of guys, and that kind of works for Minnesota. But Max Brosmer's gone. I wonder if, like, when Minnesota struggles, they just don't have the right quarterback play to make the offense go. Because again, Fleck is an offensive mind. He's a former wide receiver at Northern Illinois, played very briefly for the 49ers. But I just kind of feel that like with Minnesota, like, is this a team that could win about 8 games? Is this a team that's going to win 4 games? I don't necessarily know how they fit into the new Big Ten in terms of like, is having a more balanced schedule, playing more teams from the East, good or bad for them? Like, I know that like the more balanced schedule favors Penn State and hurts Iowa probably the most. I would say with Minnesota, like probably right in the middle because I think they can take advantage of those West Coast schools. Like I think asking teams from Southern California to go play in Minneapolis, Minnesota is challenging. But then again, you got to travel to like Eugene, Oregon, or Seattle, Washington. That could be challenging as well. The other team that I had a hard time figuring out is Rutgers, and it comes down to me like, is the quarterback play going to be good enough? We know that Greg Shannon has a really good feel for what this team is. We know that they're going to be very sound defensively. They recruit and they retain well. there's a bit of a finite ceiling, which is about 8-4, but like you're gonna win about between 5 and 8 games every year with this guy as your head coach. I think Minnesota is a little bit higher of a ceiling because I think that you have a little bit more of a home field advantage because of the weather in some capacities. You've also your head coach has won at a higher rate a little bit more recently than the other ones, but those are really those are really the two teams I kind of feel about that with regards to the Big Ten, with Minnesota and Rutgers. Moving on to the Big 12, this is the hardest one for me to figure out as expected because there's not a lot separating the best team in the league, which I think is going to be Arizona State again, versus the team at the bottom of the league, which might be UCF. We'll talk about UCF next. I don't know if they're the worst, but like that you get my point. Like at beyond Arizona State, there's just so much variance between 2 and 16. I'm not saying that the team I have pegged two is going to finish 16th, but like it could happen. That's how this league works. The first team I want to touch on here with 4 for the Big 12 is Kansas. I'm kind of wondering, like, have we seen the best of Lance Leipold there in Lawrence to this point? I understand that they're not playing all their games at at David Booth. They are renovating it. So they're playing a lot of games at Arrowhead this year. This is a team that did not play very well at the start of last year. And then they went on, they got in a bit of a run there towards the end there. I think they beat I don't know if they beat Colorado or BYU. They beat someone of that level. Not quite a bowl team, but like certainly playing like one towards the end of the season. I figured that might be where they are, but like, do I put Kansas up there in the top like 6 or 8 teams in the league? Do I put them in the top four? I don't think I'm that bold, but like top eight, yeah, sure, I could put them there. Top six, I'm not so sure. Because like I definitely like Arizona State, Iowa State, Kansas State more than them. Probably t Baylor, TCU, and Texas Tech. So then you get that next sort of tier with BYU. Maybe they're there. It's very challenging in the sense that Kansas like could climb very high, but they could also be in the bottom quarter of the league. Like if I'm looking at who at the bottom four teams in the Big 12 is going to be next year, I would probably be leaning closer towards West Virginia because they got to reboot this thing. UCF, Arizona, and then like you're looking at this, I'm like, who do you really think is going to be really bad? And maybe Cincinnati, but like you kind of very much find Kansas in like the middle eight of the league. They're probably somewhere in the 8 to 12 range, to be totally honest with you. But like I think if it all goes according to plan there for the Jayhawks, they could potentially, not saying they're going to get to Arlington, but I think they could have a say in who gets to Arlington. The other team that's in this category for me is Colorado. Again, probably a little bit higher ceiling because you have a little bit more star recognition there with Deion Sanders, but Shador Sanders isn't a player anymore. Neither does Travis Hunter. You have Juju Lewis coming in, but he's fresh out of high school from nearby Carrollton, Georgia, not far from where I am. And then you've got what Caden Salter coming in from Liberty, a former guy who played at Liberty for a long time, had a lot of success there for Jamie Chadwell, maybe a little bit with Hugh Freeze. I don't really know exactly what the overlap is with him there in Lynchburg, but like has certainly been there for a while. I feel with Colorado, the staff needs to really like level up. There's a lot of big names there. We know about Deion Sanders. We know about Pat Shermer. We know that Warren Sapp is a part of it. We know that Marshall Faulk is a part of it. So you're talking about three of the greatest players of me growing up in the NFL, like on this coaching staff. Guys that were also absolute studs in college. Whether that would be Deion Sanders at FSU, Warren Sapp at Miami, Marshall Faulk at San Diego State. Like these it's all going to come about player development. They've been so portal heavy, the last couple of years. But like if they start recruiting a little bit more in high school, I think that there's going to be less variance there. My question is like, is this going to be a 9-3 team like it was a year ago? Is it going to be a 3-9 team or 4-8 team like it was 2 years ago? The answer is probably somewhere in between. They're going to win about 6 or 7, maybe 8 games. But I don't know. I feel like the biggest difference for me and why I picked Kansas more so than Colorado is Kansas was playing really good football down the stretch after really struggling from the beginning. I think that basically means you found something that works. within your roster. I think it also tells you that you've got good coaching. And there's good coaching there in Boulder as well, but I think that there might be great coaching there in Lawrence. So I've got Kansas and Colorado there. And then moving on to the SEC, the team that I have the hardest time to get a feel on is Missouri. Again, it's the same sort of thing. Missouri is the NC State of the SEC. Whenever you're high on them, they disappoint. Whenever you're low on them, they shock you. You look at a team that would have made the 12-team playoff in 2023, and they won a playoff. They would have won a playoff game. They beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. And then last year they were very fraudulent to me. I felt that their offense was too looked better in the third heavy. Brady Cook was not quite as good. They just didn't have the ground game they needed. I think Eli Drinkwitz is a good head coach, but is he a great head coach? I think that like there's also the chance that if it doesn't go very well for Hugh Freeze at Auburn, maybe he goes back to Auburn. That's the job that I think he'd leave Mizzou for. Um, you bring in Bo Pribula from Penn State, the backup to Drew Aller there for a while. This is a guy that I think like going to Mizzou, we are going to see like a level up there. I think it's not going to be Brady Cook, and it's certainly not going to be Drew Pine anymore. I think that that's very much to the benefit of Mizzou, but like I'm looking at them, I'm like, schedule's not terribly difficult. I think that only Tennessee and Ole Miss have as easy of schedules of them in the SEC. So maybe you find your way to like win 9 or 10 games. And if you're right there, you're in the playoff mix because you're in the SEC. I don't know where the pellets on the wall are going to be, so to speak. You probably got to beat Alabama, which I think you else use on your schedule. Maybe you got to beat LSU, A&M, teams like that. Maybe play Tennessee. Again, I don't recall everybody's schedule off the top of my head. I'm just trying to think back at games I saw a year ago because I know they're happening, but it's going to be at a different location. I think when it comes to Missouri, I, I'm looking at them like Iowa in some ways. We're like, yeah, I guess I'll have them ranked at the start of the year, but I'm always going to be doubting of them. Then we find themselves in like the top 10 end of the year, like, okay, maybe they're pretty good. Maybe we just didn't see it. Maybe we just didn't want to be a believer. And then I think when they disappoint, it's like we want to be a believer, but they're just not proving it to us. So Missouri is definitely, without question, the hardest team in the SEC for me to get a good feel on. The other one's Vanderbilt. And maybe I'm just too high on them. Maybe I just am infatuated with the live dog, Diego Pavia, with what he can do, at quarterback. He's coming back for his sixth year of college football. He's, Jerry Kill's guy. Clark Lee's got his alma mater humming. Barton Simmons knows what kind of players they want to have play at VU. But I don't think they're going to sneak up on anybody. But I don't know if you're going to beat both Alabama schools back to back, in back to back years. There are going to be wins to be had. I mean, you put Texas to the brink, but that was at home. You almost got them. I've been seeing people have Vanderbilt in the bottom quarter of the SEC, with the likes of Kentucky, Mississippi State, and Arkansas. But I kind of feel like they're better than that. I mean, maybe I'm not all the way in on Auburn, but like I think that there's a certain level of maturity that has me respecting Vanderbilt more so, but everybody else seems to be more and more down on them than me. And I'm kind of sitting there thinking like, maybe I'm too high on Vanderbilt, maybe just because I love their quarterback too much. It's kind of how I feel about South Carolina. Although I think a lot of people look at South Carolina and be like, okay, yeah, the high end of this is really, really good. Like the high end is make the playoff, win 10 games. Whereas the high end with Vanderbilt's like you win 7 games and you win your bowl game, so you go 8-5. But maybe he beat Tennessee. Maybe that's your line of demarcation. Maybe that's the game that gets you to the bowl game or build on what you did the year prior. So yeah, Vanderbilt, like I'm a little bit questioning how I feel about them that I'm a little bit too high on, but like it's Diego Pavia, man. Who am I kidding? So to wrap this segment up, the two teams that I had for each league, the ACC, I had I had Pitt, and then who's the other one I had? Pitt and North Carolina State. Yeah, I feel like North Carolina State's always the pick there. In the Big Ten, I had Minnesota and Rutgers. Kind of feel like they're always going to be there. Big 12, I had Kansas and Colorado. In the SEC, I had Missouri and Vanderbilt. So let's move on to like the second half of our show with some always be Cruden. Wisconsin has been slapped on the wrist for 139 impermissible calls to 48 prospects, puts them on a year-long probation. So they made 139 calls to 45 different prospects, and I believe that some of the nature of those calls that they got busted for, like 75, maybe 75% of those calls, like were less than a minute in length. Like they were calling people like in improper times. And again, like it's probably the only first time there's really been any issue with Luke Fickell there in Madison. But I guess like what I was curious to hear what Cody's thoughts were on the situation there with the Badgers is like once again, this is another reason why I'm not high on this regime. Phil Longo, the offensive coordinator that you didn't like, well, he's now the head coach at Sam Houston, and Cody has some thoughts about Phil Longo from his time working under Mac Brown there at North Carolina. So you've got a head coach who is a former nose guard at Ohio State, played maybe very briefly for the Saints, um, was the interim head coach at his alma mater in between Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer, a team probably the worst Buckeyes team I've seen in my adult life. I think I was like 2012 or 30, whatever 11 whatever it was, a little clunky there. Goes to Cincinnati, has the Bearcats playing at levels that maybe we had only seen under Brian Kelly maybe a decade or so prior. Goes to the playoff. Then the opportunity comes for like, him to go over to Wisconsin. Everyone's like, oh, this is a great hire. I didn't see it. I didn't think this was a good one because I feel like he needed to go to a place where like the resources were just a little bit better. Like Notre Dame would have been a better fit for him. But like Michigan, but he would never go there because he's an Ohio State guy. Maybe Michigan State, something like that would have been a better fit. You're trying to run an air raid offense in Madison, Wisconsin. That's like trying to harvest snow in Fort Lauderdale. You're just not doing that. But I'm sitting here, and this is year three of him leading charge. They went 5-7 last year. That was a team that we know their season largely ended when Tyler Van Dyke, I almost said Tyler Shuck there. Tyler Van Dyke tore his ACL versus Alabama at Camp Randall, week three of the season. Really made things challenging there for the Badgers. But I don't know. I feel like these calls and stuff, like this, I'm trying to think about this more on the fly. This is kind of how I wanted to do, like just the vibes I'm getting from it. Well, there's three things. One, it's reckless. Two, it kind of feels desperate. And then three, it just seems very counter to what you would see it with Wisconsin. Like in terms of reckless, like you've been a head coach for a while. You've been a head coach, at the group of five level at a school that's now Power Four. You've been at a Power Four school for a couple of years now. You've essentially been coaching at a Power Four level for a while. And it's like this is something I think you would see for a coach that isn't as seasoned or as good as Luke Fickell. And as far as it, being like you know, reckless, yeah, that's part of it too. I think you'd be a little more buttoned up there. Desperate. It's like you're trying to like recruit people that maybe don't want to play Wisconsin. Maybe you're turning away the people that should be playing here. They have a niche in college football. It's a lot of homegrown guys, but it's they kind of know like they're under Paul Chris, under Barry Alvarez. I felt like they had a really good feel for who they were. Uh, Brett Bielema as well. Maybe not so much under Gary Anderson, but like they've had when they've had the right coach, they know who they are. Yeah, and I think when you have a head coach like that at Wisconsin, you can win 10 or 11 games a year. You can go to a Rose Bowl. You can make the playoff in this environment now. You can be a top five team in the Big Ten, which is kind of shocking now that like in the 18 team Big Ten, like they're not even close. Like I figure like the only teams in the Big Ten that I think are definitively worse than them are Purdue, Maryland, and they're right there with Northwestern. And that's all you really need to know. And then as far as it being like reckless, desperate, and then it just like a bad fit, like again, I feel like you would know these people, like you would know your fan base, you would know the guys you recruit. You're like recruiting bloodline there in Wisconsin. It's like it's not the deepest well, but you can get players there. There's a right kind of guy that you can get and recruit. And it just kind of feels that Luke Fickell just continues to not understand where he's coaching. Like, I don't know. Does he think he's wearing a Miami Redhawks jersey, like coaching for Miami or something? Like I just don't think the fit is good. And then I understand he got like an extension, but even if he got an extension from his athletic director, I mean, like, does that mean that he's going to be doing this forever? I mean, there's some big pocketed booster out there that will get rid of him if it doesn't work. So I don't know. Like 139 impermissible calls is fine. 48 prospects, and I think people like. And again, this seems really minor. Like this is just a slap on the wrist in some ways, but just like the sheer numbers of it that I saw, it kind of basically means that like somebody wanted this to get out, like or somebody like I don't know, if narked on him is the word, but like it kind of almost feels as though like maybe some similar parallels to the end of the Jeremy Pruitt era there in Tennessee, where people like we want this bozo out of here. Like maybe he's a good coach or whatnot, but like he's not working here. This is not acceptable for what we want to do as a football team. We have standards at Wisconsin, and we have standards at Tennessee. And honestly, like Wisconsin has more brand equity or more cachet with their fan base than I think Tennessee. Like Tennessee had been dealing with a lot of crap between Philip Fulmer and Josh Heupel. Like I've been writing and covering the sport throughout the entire time that this was happening. Like, I was in school for like Fulmer's final year. I was Lane Kiffin's 1 year here. I went through the Derek Dooley era. I went through the Butch Jones era, the most cringeworthy thing ever. I saw, the Jeremy Pruitt era. Now I've seen Heupel. It's made a more positive return here. I just kind of feel like Wisconsin's lost its way. And maybe Fickle will find it out. Maybe he'll find his next place. Brett Bielema, very, very tremendous at Wisconsin. Not the best fit at Arkansas, kind of made it work, just not the best fit, is making it work now with Illinois. So maybe I wish Luke Fickell the best. Maybe this will work out for him, but very, very, very dubious on it working out for him long term. I just don't think that like again, maybe I was ahead of the curve here. I just didn't think the fit was going to work. I figured that like you need it's not like you need like one of your own guys to lead Wisconsin. You need a guy that has just maybe just has Big Ten energy coursing through his veins. And I thought Fickle was that. Maybe it's the wrong kind of Big Ten energy. Maybe you need a Big Ten West energy. That's kind of what I got there. Moving on to our penultimate topic here with some "You're doing great, sweetie." So UCF's football stadium has been renamed the Acrisure Bounce House. What are we doing? I think it was the FCG or FGC Mortgage Stadium prior to that. I understand that the nickname for UCF's football stadium is the Bounce House. But for me, like you're adding Acrisure. When I hear Acrisure, I think of them being attached to the Steelers stadium and what was Heinz Field. And I feel that like since the Steelers have been playing at Acrisure Stadium and not Heinz Field, they haven't been the same team. They've become more and more dysfunctional with each passing year. And I don't know if that's really the case with UCF or it's going to be the case with UCF. But like this is a team that has achieved tremendous heights there under Scott Frost. He went to Nebraska, his alma mater, and absolutely bombed. Like nobody wanted to hire him. He was like an analyst or something for the Rams. This job opened up. He took it. I mean, I don't know if it was because John Summerall didn't want it, but like Scott Frost is back in Orlando. And the same program he's going to is not the same one. Maybe they're down on their luck as much as it was when he first found it. But UCF's not playing in the American anymore. They're playing in the Big 12. They're playing now in the most geographically isolated team in that entire 16-team conference. They're more geographically isolated than West Virginia was when they joined with TCU over a decade ago. They're also leveling up. They're not a group of fives team anymore. They're a power four team. They compete on the same level as Florida, Florida State, and Miami. You wanted to see at the big kids table, you have one now, but you're playing in a bounce house. And that's fine. And I think that's cool. Maybe that's adding to like the lore of UCF here. But I just kind of go think maybe I don't know what Cody's thoughts would have been on this, but and I'll probably just say this real quick before we kind of finish up the show prematurely here. But I guess like when I'm sitting here thinking what called the Acrisure Bounce House. So you picked Acrisure, as your sponsor. Like what we just know that as the team, you just know that as the company that took away Heinz Field in Pittsburgh. Like nobody's like really celebrating that now up in Western PA. Will they be celebrating that in Central Florida? We'll see. But probably the biggest thing I have here is this ties into the Scott Frost of it all. Adam Rittenberg wrote about this for his future power rankings. I think outside of Purdue, I mean, UCF was like one of the bottom four teams in the Power Four. Like they were ranked like no higher than like 65. Like down towards the bottom, it's like Stanford, it's like Purdue, it's West Virginia and UCF. And I think in a lot of ways, outside of Barry Odom, like going to West Lafayette, like every single one of those teams with Stanford, West Virginia, and UCF, like they're reaching into their past. Like Andrew Luck, their star quarterback at Stanford, is like the GM. They don't have a AD yet. They have an interim head coach in Frank Wright, whose brain is absolutely cooked. Stanford may not win a game this year. Then you got West Virginia after dealing with just a bunch of Neil Brown nonsense for several years. They go and they get one of their own, Don Nalen's greatest disciple in Rich Rodriguez. He comes back to Morgantown after being away for almost 2 decades. The prodigal son returns after a very tough run at Michigan, a pretty decent run at Arizona, and a great run at Jacksonville State. So that's going on. Then you got the same sort of thing here with Scott Frost going to UCF. And I kind of feel like you're playing nostalgia here way too much. And I think like there's some areas of nostalgia in life, you think it makes you feel good. Longing for the glory days of everything. But were the glory days really all that great? With the UCF, they might have been. And I think that's where it gets really scary here is like the day and age of you going undefeated and claiming a national title is not happening. Like you have to go win like 16 games or 14 games, go 14 and 2 and win a national title in the playoff in this format. Maybe one day UCF could get there. I'm not ruling that out. I think they're in the right geographic location. If they have the rising fan base, I think in time UCF can be on that level like Oregon is, and I think that that's great for college football. And believe me, I want to see UCF succeed. But I kind of feel like when you have a guy who's had so much success here, failed somewhere else, and he comes back, like the second hill is not going to be as high. It's a roll like life's a roller coaster. It's got its ups and downs. But there's a reason why that second hill is not as tall as the hill that you're coming off the chain. Because gravity always wins. It's going to bring you down. Like a bounce house, even though the bounce house will push you up maybe artificially a little bit. Um, I know I'm probably talking about this a little bit too much here, but UCF is truly a one of one program. It's a very, very rabid fan base. It's its own separate thing, doing their own thing here. And maybe it'll work out. Maybe they'll double down on who they are and it will work out great. But I don't know. I feel like when you go back into your past expecting it to be as good as it once was, when it probably wasn't that good to begin with, the expectations are up here and the results may be down here. And that difference is it's called disappointment. And I'm dubious of if it's going to work with Scott Frost long term there at UCF. But like, if there is a benchmark where it could work out, maybe you try to learn from what you saw out of what's his name? Bill Snyder at Kansas State. He retired in '05, came back in '09, and coached for like another decade. Maybe it'll be Scott Frost Stadium at the end of the day, and maybe that's where his football home will be because he's not really welcome in Nebraska with how badly that went. But yeah, I think that the name is just very unique and intriguing. And look, I know a lot of the stadiums have corporate sponsors and stuff like that, but I think like the best college football stadiums, like they're named after somebody. It's Sanford Stadium. It's Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. It's Williams Bryce Stadium. Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium. Uh, Dale K. Royal Stadium. Like Owen Field at Gaylord Family Memorial Oklahoma Stadium. Like Memorial Stadium. But Acrisure, like, I understand you want the sponsorship money and everything like that. Maybe selling out's not always the best thing to do, but I do wish UCF the best, and I think that they're going to be a team that has a lot to prove. Yeah, I think they'll surprise some people here. So maybe I'm a little more optimistic on the Knights than I probably should be. But Acrisure Bounce House, that's a very different name. It's one of one. It's a Gainbridge Field House for the Pacers play. It's unbelievable. Let's wrap up the show today. I'm gonna remember some dudes. So since Cody's not here, I'm gonna do four and finish the show up here today. And I put down the list just some guys that I think would be interesting to talk about. I'm gonna start with one. Let's start with South Carolina quarterback Connor Shaw. This is a guy that played for Steve Spurrier from Flowery Branch, Georgia. I believe he had a cup of coffee there with the Browns, maybe. This is a guy relatively my peer, and he was after Steven Garcia, another guy that like I can remember at some point, kind of the tail end of the Spurrier era there in Columbia. But what I remember about Connor Shaw was, well, first off, everybody's got a friend like this, where like you just say the first name and last name together because it just flows out of the tongue. Like there's always somebody like that. I don't know who else. Okay, we got a guy like that here at Fanside, Matt Connor. Like it's just Matt Connor. That's how it always is. And he covers the Chiefs. Definitely check that out there on Arrowhead Addict. He loves him some Kansas State Chiefs over there in Indianapolis. But like that's a perfect example of that. But with Connor Shaw, I always kind of felt like his athleticism was like sneaky quick, a little bit overstated. But I think that when he was at South Carolina, he was in his bag. More importantly, I think this is the sign of like not all great quarterbacks have to be great at the NFL. They can be great at college. And he was great because like Spurrier empowered him. He's like, oh yeah, you may have this five star, but we're going to beat you with Connor effing Shaw, and they did, and they won a lot of games with him. Certainly a guy that made my life hell, there for a bit there in college when Georgia and South Carolina's rivalry was probably at its apex. So yeah, definitely remembering seeing Connor Shaw here. Let's remember. Let's remember another guy. Let's remember Arizona State defensive tackle Will Sutton. Again, this is a guy that played, I believe, for Todd Graham, like basically about a decade ago, like the same era that Brock Osweiler was playing for Arizona State. Arizona State was kind of like winning about 6 or 8 games a year. And I remember he got drafted pretty high, I think, but like just a very big dude. I remember in Pac-12 After Dark, you would see games in Tempe, and you would just see this giant defensive tackle down there wreaking havoc. And the thing that I always remember about him is he kind of reminds me of like a lot of the best players at Arizona State. There's a lot more now. There haven't been one for a while. There are certainly guys in the '90s with Jake Plummer and the late Pat Tillman and Terrell Suggs after that a little bit too. But they just kind of stand out in the field. Like you're watching them, like you can't take your eyes off of them on the field. I forget who they were playing. It could have been Colorado. It could have been. I don't think it was territorial, but it's somebody else in the Pac-12 of note. I know. I'm trying to think of this memory here. I think they were playing. It was a night game at Tempe. They're wearing like black jerseys as opposed to like maroon. And I just remember him like there was this one series. I can't, I'm blanking it could have been UCLA. Let's just say it was UCLA, and we'll figure out whatever this game was. But there's like a play or series where like he basically stopped the running game on three. He made three straight tackles, or like basically was right in the middle of the action. And I remember hearing the commentary, it's like, why are you running at this guy three plays in a row when you saw how the first two went? And he was just that kind of a disruptor, kind of a mountain of a man there in the middle of the Sun Devils defense. Certainly a player that stood out there for a while for me, basically in the lead up to me becoming a writer. I remember Will Sutton quite a bit. The cursor landed here. Let's remember Missouri wide receiver Jeremy Maclin. He played for the Tigers, a little bit older than me, so kind of like the Chase Daniel era, maybe the other James Franklin, probably before Matty Mock, before they made the move to the SEC. Certainly way before Drew Lock was quarterbacking for them, but just a tremendous athlete. Like like Missouri has athletes. They recruit the St. Louis area and Chicago pretty well. But every time they end up having a player that like is going to be a star on Sundays, it becomes very obvious very quickly. I just remember like the block M on the helmet and everything with that for Missouri. I just remember their play. This is back in the Big 12. We'll just say it's against Texas Tech for the sake of argument because they're notorious for not tackling people or playing any defense. There must have been a play like outside the numbers where he just goes up and gets it and then turns around and then just goes like 60 yards. I remember like a Sports Center highlight, like there's other stuff for that too. Like he was a guy that like, he could possession receive like outside the numbers. Like he was the guy that I would always trust like Daniel or whomever to get him the ball, on a quick curl route, maybe a come and go route, like kind of a thing. He's a guy that I felt like he had a good NFL career, played for the Eagles for a little bit. Remember there was an injury or something as well. There was also I'm trying to remember there was something that happened in his playing career where like there's one year where like it just kind of got derailed for some reason. But I just remember him being at Missouri, a little bit older than me, just wreaking havoc. Kind of, some of the best Gary Pinkel teams were prominently featured guys like Jeremy Maclin going out there and doing all sorts of everything. And then the final guy I want to remember on the show, let's go with a heavy hitter for this one. Let's go with a real heavy hitter. Let's go with Virginia defensive end Chris Long. We know about him with his podcast. We know about him being a Walter Payton Man of the Year. We know about him being a Super Bowl champion with the Patriots, the Eagles. I also know about him being, former number two overall pick by the then St. Louis Rams. Went after Jake Long and before Matt Ryan, and Matt Ryan went on to have the far better career of all of them. But Chris Long, son of Howie Long, grew up in Charlottesville. What I like about him and what I remember the most about him at Virginia is maybe it was kind of towards the end there. Like there was a little bit of it kind of like in the post Matt Schaub world where UVA had some runway. I think kind of after like, Schaub, DeBricka, Ferguson, and Chris Long left, and then they really got bad. Like Virginia for a few years was like the worst team in the ACC and the Power Five or the BCS era, if you will. I don't even want to know what classification we were at that point. But Chris Long, just immense athleticism, very much, very relentless, like his dad played for the Raiders. Again, Howie Long a little bit before my time, but what I've heard about him is just like just kept going. The motor was insanely high, and I always kind of remember like Chris Long was just a different dude. He's always had very aspirational, very I can do anything, put my mind to it. Just a very you love that about people having them on the team. And I think when he went for the Rams, man, the Rams just sucked. Rams were awful. The end of like, I don't even know who the head coaches were. It was like, not even Scott. Was that Scott? Scott Linehan. Like Scott Linehan's a coach there. Steve Spagnuolo, like Jeff Fisher, 7-9 BS, just a bunch of crap. Then he goes to the Patriots, wins the Super Bowl in the 28-3 season over the Falcons. Almost played for the Falcons. Maybe that would have been a difference for us. Yeah, way to go there, Thomas Dimitroff. Then he goes to the Eagles, and he's the guy, with the underdog masks. Wins the Super Bowl the next year at 17 with the Nick Foles and everything like that. But what I remember about Chris Long, just as a player, is it didn't matter the venue. It didn't really matter like who his team was going up against. Like it could be your anonymous ESPN two kick at noon. We are coming to you live from Scott Stadium as the Virginia Cavaliers take on the Maryland Terrapins or something like that, or the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, and he was ready to play. And he starred so much at UVA that he was the number two pick. He played for his hometown team and everything. Obviously, his brother Kyle had a successful career, at Oregon, and then played in the NFL for the Bears, most notably. Um, but I think the other thing that I remember about Chris Long, that's two things. I remember like one time he went undercover pretending to be homeless when he was playing for the Rams, just trying to understand what was going on in St. Louis and the dichotomy there. Maybe that really opened his eyes. We also know about Water Boys. That's why he won Walter Payton Man of the Year. Obviously, he's doing his podcast and stuff now. But the other thing that I remember about Chris Long is I forget what show he was on. Uh, McAfee, maybe something like that. I think he was talking about how he and his friends or his teammates had like a four-bedroom apartment they rented out in Charlottesville when they were like upperclassmen. And they went back, to where they were, and they knocked on the door and said, "Hey, we hang out and we used to live here." People there wanted nothing to do with them. Like people there didn't care that this is like one of the greatest players in UVA football history, a billionaire, son of NFL royalty. Um, they didn't care at all. Like we don't want anything to do with you, but we wanted something to do with Chris Long on this here podcast. And this was episode 184 of False Start. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118. You can follow my absent-minded, absent co-host Cody Williams at the Sizzle 20. If he has internet or a computer at this point, you can follow the show at CFB False Start. Rate, listen, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. Give us a 5-star review on Apple. Really helps the show grow. I know it's kind of the heart of the off season here, and we're just kind of making up as we go because like not a whole hell of a lot to talk about, but like gets the brain going, gets the brain and everything going in that direction. Because Labor Day weekend will be here before you know it, and it's going to be absolutely wild. So yeah, coming to you guys here with slightly drier hair, a little bit lower, recording a little bit later here, but yeah, Cody and I will be back on the show on Thursday, or we will have a show on Thursday. I don't know if he'll be back on, but I will make sure that we have a show on Thursday. So once again, thanks for listening, and this is False Start.